Hi, before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Shalom Manihuruk. I am an undergraduate student in Bandung Institute of Technology and also in Maryland School of Business since I am pursuing a double degree major. Today, I'll be talking about my paper with the topic of H&M supply chain analysis, focusing on how can H&M improve their sustainability through changes within their supply chain. For a little bit of context, the reasoning why I wanted to pursue the matter or pursue the subject specifically was because I see H&M as a company with a complex and very responsive supply chain within an industry known for a lack of sustainability efforts, especially in terms of uh, production but also distribution. I know that the company has had a bad past reputation on sustainability, resulting in major backlash and pushes for change within their operations, specifically stemming from uh, prior issues in 2019. And then lastly, I think up from that 2019 starting point until now, 2025, I feel like there's a long period without comprehensive reporting on the many aspects related to H&M supply chain processes. If we continue to the problem statement, we can see I think H&M claims to be very sustainable, but it's not very much backed by claims other than the claims from H&M themselves. And I don't feel like the evidence I've gathered, I don't feel like as of right now, the evidence is enough to actually substantiate that statement and actually claim for H&M to be sustainable. And so I wanted to look at that. I wanted to see if H&M is really as sustainable as they claim to be through their production, their labor ethics, as well as accountability towards goals and statements they made in 2019. If we look at the research questions, there are a few things I wanted to focus on, mainly supply chain function, looking at how the supply chain actually functions, um, how the processes are integrated within the company, and also managing the scope of the business itself and see how it can monitor the many parties it may be uh, working with. I wanted to look at the triple bottom line, mainly the people, planet, and profit framework to see how H&M's production supply chain feeds into that, and how I could potentially find ways to improve their supply chain sustainability through this framework. And lastly, I wanted to look at the pros and cons, or mainly the strengths and weaknesses of H&M specific supply chain. And with that, I hope to find specific tailored ways of how H&M could uh, better their sustainability. Continuing to the methodology, so my method for this paper was systematic literature review. This was due to a few constraints, given that time was a big constraint, and also I did not have access to much of insider knowledge or key individuals within H&M themselves. But I do gain my data from looking at reports, multiple sources, to find information on H&M supply chain and their current sustainability efforts, as well as their progress from that 2019 base point. Research methods are listed below. We can see that I have multiple resources to make sure that my paper is comprehensive and does not leave anything to the imagination. We also have the way I do my data analysis, which comes in 6 parts, focusing on supply chain mapping, carbon footprint to measure emissions, waste and recycling to do to see um, specifically how they would manage not only production waste, but also waste caused from the consumers, and how they can mitigate um, waste from consumers that they may not be able to fully control or may not be fully in their power. I wanted to look at competition to set up a baseline of uh, what they're up against in terms of in the industry, accountability towards their past few years, uh, their past efforts and sustainability, and also their risk analysis and looking into what could happen if they remain unsustainable in the future. If you want to look at the emissions and waste, I have a few key figures, although I will say that the emissions may not be fully accurate due to the uh, data of emissions by H&M not being publicly disclosed. But if we were to estimate, we can find that the trucks used by H&M to service their 4,500 retail stores all around the world would amount to 540,000 tons of CO2 emissions on average. Um, the aircrafts that they may use for air freights and more faster distribution would amount to almost 30,000 tons of CO2 emissions. And lastly, the energy, if converted to GHG emissions uh, in the uh, numerous developing countries with retail stores of H&M, may amount to somewhere around 10,000 CO2 10,000 tons of CO2 emissions. Not to mention this is all per annum, and it's really no small amount. Next, if we look at the waste caused by H&M, we can see that per person each year in the EU, 270 kilogram worth of textile waste, which is to say waste such as clothing, pants, and other fabrics for fashion, would amount to 270 kilograms alone. This is a very big number. You can see that from the production side, 85 liters of water is used for each kilogram of clothing produced, which is very inefficient. And lastly, H&M claims of 5 to 15% of recycled materials from production and retail, although other research, such as research from the European Parliament, will find that these numbers may be a bit slightly exaggerated, since the European Parliament only found a 1% of recycled materials from production and retail. Continuing. Lastly, I wanted to look at my findings from accountability and risk analysis. We can see that although H&M may not truly be as sustainable as they claim, they do have certain figures that may show that they have done improvements to increase sustainability as the years go by. We can see that from the figures below, they have reductions in emissions, reductions in electricity usage, specifically electricity intensity, and also a big share of collection of recycled materials. Although through the process of production, this number of volume may reduce to the aforementioned 5 to 15% of actual product produced from recycling. And lastly, a big number of investments spent on increasing sustainability through different various efforts. One of these efforts can be seen with H&M's efforts in investing in new yarn, circulose yarn, which in theory would help reduce production waste, and also use production waste in the way of reducing the amount of water needed to produce clothing per kilogram, but also take their current wastes and consumer waste, or products discarded by the consumers after they are no longer wanted or no longer used, to be cycled back into production and create a more circular economy. And lastly, I wanted to talk about worker rights. Although I will say this is much more of an ethical case, I do think it pertains a lot to how production is being done by H&M and how they monitor and regulate production. Since we can see that from the number, there's a key figure of 100,000 average cases per year in Bangladesh over the 4 years of reporting done by a number of third parties. And this may indicate a problem within how production is being done for companies such as H&M, in which we see the workers may not be paid living wages. They may be susceptible to less than ideal working conditions, and also um, uh, many ethical and how do you say and also sexual misconducts in the workplace. And I think this is very important to mention in how H&M may choose to prioritize their production over how their production output over how the production is actually being done, whether it's ethical or not. So to conclude my report, I think H&M has a supply chain that maintains a balancing act between being responsive and efficient, although there is more of a slight bias towards responsiveness and how they can deliver quickly and produce also very quickly in large volumes. I think issues within the company's production is heavily impacting the environment and laborers through unsustainable production practices, but also a lack of monitoring in how laborers are treated, and the ethics of how laborers work in these production facilities. Lastly, given their multinational scope, I think H&M has the ability to make a lot of change and make a lot of difference in the world, especially in how their laborers are treated and how they impact the environment in every small change due to the scope and vastness of their business. And I think this is a very important point to mention. That is to say that H&M does have the power to create a big amount of change, but it is up to them to realize this power and use it responsibly, and manage their business operations in a way that it can be sustainable in the long run, benefiting not only their shareholders economically, but also their laborers and the many parties they work with in keeping the planet habitable and keeping their business healthy for the environment and the people working for them. That is all for my presentation. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this has been informative and helpful for your understanding of H&M supply chain. Thank you.